Wanted to make a little video today going over the CAGED system. Seems like some guitar players want to make a big deal out of the CAGED system and turn it into some big thing that you have to study for months or years before you can really get it down. But the truth is, the concept itself is super simple. I'm hoping to be able to teach it to you in about 5 minutes here in this video. Once you have the concept in place, then you can branch off in all kinds of different directions, but you can still use the CAGED system as sort of a framework for much more complex ideas. What CAGED will do for you, among other things, is it sort of maps out where all the chord tones are. So say you're playing an E chord, the CAGED system can give you a quick way of mapping out the entire fretboard for that E chord. The reason I say CAGED is so simple is because it's based on the basic open position cowboy chords that you probably already know: C chord, A, G, E, and D. And what we're going to be doing is taking each of those 5 shapes, turning them into sort of a movable chord form that we'll be able to place anywhere on the neck depending on what key we're in, and it ends up mapping out the whole fretboard in that key. So let's start with the shapes. First of all, we have to make movable forms out of those 5 shapes. So I'm going to do all of these examples for starters here on the 5th fret so you can just see how the shapes look. So the C shape, for starters, if you pictured a bar on the 5th fret, and then the shape of a C chord above your bar. When I place this C shape on the 5th fret, as I have it here, it gives me an F chord. The next shape is the A shape. You've probably already seen this one as a bar chord before. Looks like that. If I place it here on the 5th fret, it gives me a D chord using the A shape. The G shape is one that's pretty difficult, if not impossible, to play. You have to picture a bar on the 5th fret and then the shape of a G chord above that bar. So I guess it would look like this. In this position, it gives me a C chord. But I'll remind you again, you're not going to play this as a chord. You're just using it as like a visual aid to situate yourself for whatever key you're playing in. The E shape is the standard bar chord that you've probably seen. If I place it here on the 5th fret, it gives me an A chord. And then lastly, we have the D shape. This is another one that's pretty difficult to play. In fact, I would really probably never play this as it is. But again, I'll remind you, we're just using it as a visual aid here. So if I barred the 5th fret and then put like a D chord above that, in this case it gives me a G. So the idea is that you should be able to take any major chord and play it 5 different ways based on those 5 CAGED shapes. I'm going to do examples in the key of D for starters here. So I'm going to ignore this basic D chord for right now, and I'm going to start using the 5 CAGED shapes. To make a D chord using the C shape, place a bar on the 2nd fret, play the shape of a C chord above your bar. Note, I use this chord sometimes as an actual chord, and when I do, I don't cover all 6 strings. I actually only cover 3. Gives me a nice way to play like an E flat chord or a D flat chord. You can very often look at the highest point on the fretboard of one of these shapes, and that is going to very often become the lowest point of the next chord shape. So where my pinky is here on the C shape, if I now place my A shape right there, I have a D chord using the A shape. Now if I move up to the 7th fret, I have a G shape. That also gives me a D chord. And then again, I look at the highest point of that here on the 10th fret. Now I have the E shape. Also gives me a D chord. And finally, if I move up to the 12th fret, place a bar, and then the shape of a D chord above that, and that gives me a D chord using the D shape. So I just mapped out 5 different ways to play a D chord using the CAGED shapes: C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape, D shape. And then once you've done all 5 shapes, they start repeating themselves. So here on 14 I have the C shape, A shape, etc. So as a good exercise, just pick any random key and try to apply all 5 of those CAGED shapes to that key. So along with each of these 5 CAGED shapes, there's a pentatonic scale fingering that corresponds very closely to it, you can see the cage shape right within the pentatonic scale. And I'm talking major pentatonic here, not minor pentatonic, by the way, just to make that clear. So back to the key of D for my examples. So for a D chord, I have the C shape in the second position. Remember, when I say second position, I mean basically my index finger's on the second fret, and then the other fingers are above that. So I have my D chord using the C shape, and I have what I call the C shape pentatonic scale in that same spot. When you practice these things, it's always a good idea to play the chord, play the scale, and then play the chord again, and you kind of hear everything together. That's really important. So here's the A shape now. I'm moving up to the fifth position. I have the A shape to give me a D chord, and the pentatonic there looks like this. Move up to the 7th fret, and I'm now using a G shape to give me a D chord. This pentatonic fingering is probably pretty familiar to you. Move up to the 10th fret, and now the E shape gives me a D chord. Lastly, I'll jump up to 12th position, and now I have the D shape to get a D chord. And here's the pentatonic that corresponds to that. As you get familiar with all of these caged shapes, you start to learn a bunch of licks that go with each of these chords. So for example, if I'm improvising over a D chord, I can play off of the C shape, or the A shape, or the G shape, or the E shape, or finally the D shape. And what you'll see has happened is I've basically covered the entire fretboard for D. So on my website, there's a page that corresponds to this video. There's PDFs you can download that have all these fingerings. And when you use the backing tracks on my website, you'll see the diagrams that I use for the scales also incorporate the caged fingerings.